Hello everyone. So if you're watching this video, it means you saw the announcement for this week with the videos that we'll be going over. And one of them is actually from an outside source, and they're going over one of the 12 principles of animation that we call appeal. So it's one of the ones we're going to go over this week. Not really something I can talk about in class because it requires lots of examples. But the reason I linked to this is because in the 2.5 minutes he has, he packs in just tons of information and wonderful examples, and you kind of can't do better than that. But he's taking this from a 2D perspective, so I wanted to um, go over a couple of different differences from a 3D perspective, and also show you where you can get more information on character design if that was something that interested you. So, a lot of examples I show in class are from something called the Living Lines Library. If you Google search Living Lines Library, you will get the link. I will also be posting this link to the announcements page so that you guys have it there. So, it's basically just like I don't know, like a person is just putting together like all the stuff that they can find everywhere that's been released, like stuff on YouTube from Warner Brothers. So this must be, yes, this is from the new Space Jam movie. And, they release some stuff online because they're like, hey, look at this pencil test. And rather than us having to go looking everywhere, this kind person throws it all up on here and makes it sortable by types of things, and then within that by movies. So I can go into, if I want to look at a character stuff, that would be concepts, model sheets, etc. And then you can come in here and you can see all the various different movies that they've collected from. It's a lot of Disney, it's some DreamWorks, um, some Leica, and some Warner Brothers. Those would be the big ones that have stuff in here. Not so much from some of the other companies, but it's a good mix of stuff. There's also some anime in here as well. But I wanted to speak specifically to 3D because one of the things that they talk about in this, not just in this video, but in Frank and Ellie Johnson's, let's see, Illusion of Life, in this book. There we go. That's been released before. You may have seen it around. There we are. Um, when they talk about it in this book, they talk about lines and how you can't have too many lines when you're drawing because you have to repeat them. And so all of us in 3D are probably thinking, oh, well, it's in 3D. We don't have to worry about that. Except in some ways you do for a few reasons. So I want to show this image, excuse me, from the character's design of How to Train Your Dragon. Bear with me scrolling for one moment. Here it is. So this right here down at the bottom is one of my favorites because you can kind of see the whole um, range of stuff from closest to the book to when they started aging him up to oh, he's too old here, we're gonna age him back down, and then also the transition from 2D to 3D. And you guys, many of you have probably noticed this before, but even in 3D, things will start off very illustrative, lots and lots of details everywhere. And then even in the 3D version, things are a little bit simplified. And that still happens in part because of technology, like rendering all of this would take a lot. It's also because our film language has been driven by the same stuff that made Pinocchio, right? We learned how to watch movies from these older movies. And so to have a character that is just like lots and lots of detail, we wouldn't relate to that as much necessarily, except maybe in a video game environment where we have this interaction that lasts hours and hours and hours and hours. Those characters have immense amount of details to them. All right, so if you look up basically any of the top tier video games that have been released in the last few years, the amount of detail in them is ridiculous. It's unheard of for animation even 10 years ago. This doesn't work in a film. It doesn't work in a TV show, especially not a film, because a film's only a couple hours. You have a couple hours to like get to know the character and get involved in things, and there's so much going on here that you're not going to maybe notice the acting. But you have to do this in video games because you spend 30, 40, 50 hours of the video game. And so you don't get all of those details in Hiccup or any of the other characters, right? Like this is probably toned down from the drawings, but it gets toned down even further. They do tricks where all this detail isn't as visible unless you're close up, and like not a lot of these things are moving on the characters. And it's, same with Stoic. There's a lot more going on in this drawing than there is in the movie. And we do that as part of the appeal process. We need to get the audience emotionally invested in our characters quick. With this, you've got time. With movies, with TV shows, you have less time. And production is different, real time is different than rendering. There's a whole host of things that are going on. Um, so when you're reading the old books, or when you're watching things based on 2D, keep in mind there are some differences, but there are still some similarities. And the further you get from the original to different languages, video games are a different language, the more different the idea of appeal is going to be. um, but the idea behind appeal is to make something that doesn't look nice, like as in nicely drawn, although that helps, but to make something that is engaging with people. So these flat drawings that they have as their as their character designs, they some of these are done quicker. They might have errors. They might have like weirdnesses to them. It's still like, this is adorable. And it's because of the things the guy talks about in his video, with the posture, with the proportions that are exaggerated. There's usually a gag or something, going on in these. Um, with the color, with the shapes. So it's about drawing people in, and it's not just about good guys looking pleasant. It's about people looking interesting. It's about things being made with care so that we find they're interesting. So I just did a Google search for like modern character TV design, and like, I love this because these are three completely different styles of shows, and they've got all sorts of juxtapositions here of different styles of shows, and they're all appealing in their own way. Now, not everyone likes all three shows, but there's different ways to draw characters, there's different ways to model characters to give them different sorts of appeal, and these different shows are all going to have different animation styles to support the fact that they have different character designs, and all that, and they're telling different kinds of stories. You don't tell the same kind of story with this full-on fluid animation as you do with the dialogue and such that you find in some of these other ones. So please make sure that you're taking a very broad idea of what good character design is. There's a wide range of character animation styles that can be considered appealing. And be particularly careful of people who are like, golden age of Disney, that's the only way. What? No. There's lots of super flat stuff now that's really interesting, and you should be taking note of that as well. I also wanted to show you two things we'll be dealing with over the next couple weeks, not necessarily this week. But these are two rigs that we work with. This one is made by the same guy who does the other rigs that we do in class. It's called the Ultimate Pendulum. And then this one is something I built a million years ago so that we could just have something to rig up real fast when we're learning about joints. It is very obvious which is the more appealing one, right? Like the one made by the professional modeler and rigger who spent time and care with it. And that's actually like the main reason why this one is more appealing. It's that his colors are more carefully chosen. The model itself, which I can't click on most of it, is pretty simple, but it's still well considered. This is even more simple, but it's also, are things even lined up that properly? Is any edge beveled on this? No. And it's just it's crude, but not necessarily in like a way where we're trying to be crude because we're trying to go for a certain look. It's no, I was in a hurry, I had to prepare for a class, and so I made a thing. And it functions, and you can make it somewhat appealing through the motion. It's not surprising to me at all that when my students were animating these, you'll see it in the examples later, it was often broken because that was funny and it was appealing in its own way, in its own motion. So some of the appeal will come through in the way you move things in here and the gags you come up with. Um, but there's no denying that this is just like the nicer thing to look at. Even just a like little bit of a beveled area over here. Maybe it's extruded, just to give it that edge. And I talked about this so much with the modeling, you guys, when I was like, you want something to catch the light? See that now? See how this is like catching the light over here? See how this is flat and terrible? Even if I made it a shiny material, it wouldn't catch anything. There's nothing there to catch anything. Whereas with this, there is, even in this little underneath section here that we can barely see. Oh, I can't click on them, but there's a lot going on. So I highly recommend paying attention to the rigs that we're using, the ones that are provided by the guy, as we go look at the models as well. Look at how he modeled something that looks pleasant or interesting. There's actually, let me bring on the controls right here. There are a few different, nope, this one, a few different pendulum types. There you go. I'm not a big fan of this procedural texture, but he did that so there'd be no linked things. But the mace part is great. There's also one that looks like a UFO. There we go. Right? Light this correctly. It's not cute. It's, creepy. But or you light it the other way and it is cute. And that only works because he took the time and care to make something that had a lot of, the right amount of detail, the right amount of, modeled joints and the right amount of information. All right, so you can get a big leg up on your character animation by creating something that is interesting to look at, and is well made, which I guess would be one of the other 12 principles. We don't really go over it. It's not on the syllabus because it's called good drawing, except like we're not drawing, but we are. And good drawing refers to making stuff well, I would say. This is not made as well, and so it doesn't look as nice. But if we were to look at any of these examples, right, these are all like professionally made animation things. Yeah, South Park is crude. People spend a lot of time making it look like that and organizing it and writing it in a certain way. And so, yeah, there's a lot of time and energy spent to make these things by professionals who know what they're doing. And so you can have silly looking designs, but I think all of these shows do have a crudeness to them, but you can still make something that's appealing and interesting and beautiful and wonderful. And I would say these all feature good drawing. It's not your standard classic drawing, but it is good drawing. And so we still like to see it. We like to watch the show. We're interested in the show. So that's what we're going for with things like appeal and good drawing. So if you're looking up your 12 principles of animation, wondering how that applies to 3D, that is what I would say should be the takeaway.